I mean, do you think a computer could write those lyrics and sing that song in the way that the legendary Stevie Wonder could? I suspect many would say no, surely. I mean, it's just the thing about when you look at some of our greats, of which, of course, Stevie Wonder is definitely one of them, a lot of their soul, their life experience goes into their music. It's not just, words put down to paper and then instruments played together in a studio. It doesn't come about like that. Oftentimes it's blood, sweat and tears and a lot more, it must be said. And that's why I think music, musicians, albums, they very much have an impact in our lives. It's why I'm so passionate about talking about music, you can probably tell. And having actually been born and brought up in a family in which not only was I listening to greats such as Stevie Wonder, introduced to Tina Turner, Pet Shop Boys, or even The Police and Bob Marley, on the other side of that coin was also listening to Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, to Muhammad Rafi, some amazing Asha Bhonsle, Lata Mangeshkar, amazing South Asian singer-songwriters, some of the greatest in the world, actually, in the world of Bollywood. It makes you appreciate the culture even more. I think that's what I'm referencing today. So I think you won't be surprised. When I heard about this on Tuesday, I just really wanted to talk about it. More than 1,000 musicians got together, including Kate Bush and Cat Stevens, and they released a silent album, and they're protesting proposed changes to Britain's copyright laws. So basically, it could allow technology firms to train artificial intelligence models to use their work, or at least be inspired by it. But I think a lot of the times we talk about how detrimental it is, AI, and I wanted to get an understanding on whether or not AI can be incorporated into the arts safely, but also ethically. Really chuffed to say I'm joined in the studio now with Ryan Edwards, who is CEO and founder of Audo, that's AUDOO.com as well, if you'd like more details. Great to have you in the studio, Ryan.
Thank you.
It's quite something when you get a call from Sir Elton John, isn't it? Who says, this is a very cool idea. Tell me more about the fact that your platform is all about supporting musicians and has therefore been backed by one of our greatest British musicians.
Exactly. So, I was a musician in my kind of early 20s, signed a record deal, got to go in the world. Actually came on lots of BBC stations as well back then.
Nice.
Which was cool. And sadly, it didn't quite work out as these things happen. And over the years, I've heard my music in different places and I could never figure out why I was or wasn't being paid. And I've kind of spent really the last 20 years of my life building technology. So I worked in financial services and app development. I kind of had this utopia moment of, well, actually, I could build technology that could track the music that's been played and then the royalties could flow to the right people. So yeah, get away from kind of manual samples, really slow, old clunky historic systems to go, okay, let's bring this right into the 21st century.
What was the name of the band?
So we were called The Lions and we're an indie band from Wolverhampton. So
I love that. And it's quite something if you're out and about and you hear your music and you're thinking, hold on, if I check my bank account, the money's not coming through here.
Exactly. And I think if you're out on John, you probably hear your music a lot more than I did. So it was kind of even weirder for me to hear that day to day. So yeah.
And so what happens then when you're looking for investment with Audo and Sir Elton John comes a-ringing?
So I, kind of like any startup, went to friends and said, hey, I've got this idea, I want to build it. And we raised a small amount of money and built a proof of concept and then kind of went and started to show it to people and this, that and the other. And then a couple of years ago, I met somebody who worked on Sir Elton's team and he just loved what we did. He said, I love this. This is great. A few weeks later, I get this call and I was telling Elton and David about what you do. I'm like, that's not my life. That didn't happen, right? So, and he said, but they really support what you're doing. They're talking to lots of musicians and, Elton has always championed new artists. And if there's any way we can support, if you're funding, let us know and we'll do it. And that's the moment you go, okay, we're funding now. Let's bring this in. And they've been huge supporters ever since, as have many other artists in the industry as well. And it's great.
So essentially what your platform does, just in basic terms for our listeners, because I appreciate whenever I say music, it is a music business and we're talking about the business side, is your platform will track music wherever it's been played,
exactly. So
even if it's here on the radio.
So there's music is kind of consumed in lots of different ways.
Exactly.
At home in your headphones, via Spotify, Apple Music, that's already tracked because they know what you're doing on your phone, on your
Yeah.
laptop. We're very focused on kind of, if it's on radio, so we can track all of the different playlists, so we know what was played at what time.
Right.
But also in the physical world as well. So if you walk into a department store, we're not far from Oxford Street here.
Yeah.
And one of the staff members have said, hey, it's my turn for the music today. And they've just plugged in and they're playing their playlist. So we have a really small device called an audio meter, and it just goes, in the ceiling, out the way. It's normally forgotten.
Okay.
And it's just constantly tracking all that music, and it's sending it to our cloud and cataloging it. So what we can do is we can kind of bring all of that metadata together. We can work with the rights organisations to say, hey, of all that money that you collected from those licence fees, this is how you need to distribute it. These are to make sure that these artists are being paid correctly.
It's about getting the money where it needs to go.
Exactly.
Essentially, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
In the pockets of the artists who are singing the music, writing the music, performing the music.
Exactly.
Earlier on in the show, Ryan, I was joined in the studio with James Erskine. He is a technology and social media expert. And you might be thinking, well, why we talk about music? But I wanted to get his thoughts on just the relationship around AI and music. So let's have a listen to what he had to say.
I want my music brought to me by someone with human emotion. We still love music artists. So I do foresee there being a way for music artists to remain profitable and creating content they want to create.
What's your thoughts on that?
Completely agree. I think that the opening by James of there's nothing better when you go to a gig and something goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
Music's about what you hear, and it's funny because as we walked in, you got Stevie Wonder on, and so my dad is a soul and Motown vinyl collector. That's kind of what I grew up on. I grew up in the West Midlands, and it's funny because when you become 15, you want to be in a rock and roll band because that's the cool thing to do. And actually, I look back to kind of like the drum parts that I would write for the band and the music. And so much of it was influenced from that. So I was taking Northern Soul and Motown music and building it into, indie rock and that kind of scene. And I think you see it all the time. And I say there's nothing better at a gig when a voice cracks or something changes or they play a song a little bit faster or they change it. And music is something you feel, right?
Totally.
Like it's and there's so many of these stories of when people write, we talk about Elton. It's such a known story that Elton wrote, your song in less than 15 minutes because it just came out and he just got it. And I think you hear this time and time again, and it's what's magical about music.
So with that in mind then, what's your thoughts on all of these artists releasing this silent album as a way to kind of combat AI? Or is it essentially to say, hold on, you're embracing AI, but what about the musicians' rights?
And I think that's it. I think there's two sides. I think they've got to make a voice. They've got to really show that there are policy changes being made at government level which are not creativity led, because politely to politicians, they're politicians, they're not creative people, so that's not what they focus on. So there's that side. The second side is this copyright law. Copyright law has served a purpose for 100 plus years, and it has been there to protect music, protect artist work, so it can be used, and it should do, because that's I built a technology business. What's the first thing you do? You get trademarks, you get patents, you protect yourself. So that's the same. So I think with the AI kind of side of things, it's like everything. There's brilliant uses to AI. So I think back to kind of, when I was writing music, in a bedroom when I was living with my parents, and you kind of go, I'd write a part on an acoustic guitar, and I'd think, if only I could put some strings on this, and that's where I could use AI and go, right, here's a command where I just like some kind of, majestic strings that sound very orchestral and very good. The challenge is that that's great in a compositional space. Where it's not great is if somebody goes and takes somebody else's copywritten work and they commercialize it their own way, and that original person isn't compensated, right? Nobody should benefit from somebody else's work for free.
It's a difficult one, this, because the proposals would give artists or creators a so-called rights reservation. So what that means essentially is an ability to opt out. Yeah. Well, what do you think? Does that solve the issue then?
So for me, no, and I'll tell you why. Because it's going to be different in every jurisdiction around the world. So it's completely different everywhere. So so having to opt out in the UK, but say opt in Australia, that's complicated itself, because how do you do that? Also, you're a creative, you're not a business person, you might not know the process. Also, with the opt out process, there's a lot of technology that can often be built in dark rooms that nobody knows about until it's too late and it's come out. How do you control that? How does Paul McCartney know that his work was developed on for 2 or 3 years, and then somebody kind of almost erases that part of it, comes out and goes, but I found, a new AI that can simulate the Beatles even better. Well, why wasn't Paul and, the estates of the other members, or Ringo's alive, obviously, why have they not been compensated? So for me, it's about allowing that rights holder, that copyright holder, the control that's theirs. So it should be opt-in, not opt-out.
Here's my question to you. It's a bit blunt.
Yeah.
Why should we, the listeners, care? We just want the music.
Of course. So, and I think the reason for me or anybody else to care is these musicians need to make a living. That's the reality. And if their work is just fundamentally ripped off and they don't get paid, then sadly they're not going to write the next song, because they're going to go and have to take a job, and probably something far less creative. So it's like everything, a creative economy, a circular economy needs people contributing at every single level. And yeah, that's why, really. Does
it take, I don't know, the Taylor Swifts or the Beyoncés of the world to kind of come out and say, no, this is wrong, and then everyone else will stop and listen? And I only say that because, it's a beautiful thing, as you've already mentioned, Ryan, your story, the fact that Sir Elton John has invested in your business, Ordu, all around helping all musicians, probably understanding that at grassroots level, there's going to be a plethora. For every one musician that makes it, there are thousands that do not. But in order to make this a living, they need to earn. But so does it take artists at the, let's say, upper echelons like Taylor Swift or Beyonce to say, okay, whoa, we need to have a real conversation here?
Definitely. And I think, we're seeing that happen, because both Paul McCartney, Elton John, and many, many others have already come out and said that here.
Okay.
We saw Taylor do this actually slightly differently a few years ago with Apple Music.
That's right.
So when Apple Music launched, it was you could get it for 3 months for free, and you got Apple, which is arguably the richest business in the world, I think probably had the highest valuation ever, saying they weren't going to pay the artists. And you go, how many billions and potentially trillions have you got in the bank, and you're going to now launch a service on somebody else's work, but you're not going to pay them? And of course, Taylor Swift came out, and within days, that was sorted.
They did a U-turn, didn't they?
Yeah, of course they did, and that was the right thing to do. And I think that's like everything. It's hard when you're, a small growing musician, probably playing venues of 20, 30 people, to have that voice, but when you are Taylor Swift, billions of views on your channels, and you can say things and you can get attention, that's what we need. That's what everybody needs.
If I could bring London into this context, because obviously your business is based here in London. The one beautiful thing, I think, aside from the plethora of theatre venues that we have with the West End, or the amazing cultural activities we can do, or restaurants, it's got to be our live gigs. There's nothing quite like, even for example, if you want to go to the bigger venues like O2, where all of the biggest artists in the world will come to, right down through to your local pub where you might still get a fantastic live gig on a Saturday night. What's your take from the musicians you're talking to here in London? How do they feel about the emergence of AI?
I think...
Are they scared? Are they welcoming it?
Both. I think it's excited and petrified. I think excited is a tool that they can use to enhance their craft and their art form that they do, but also petrified as, because as you say, that kind of singer-songwriter that's playing the small pubs, it is their livelihood. It is allowing them to be creative. So I think if you're at the other end and you're playing the O2, you're selling 20,000 tickets a night, you're doing okay.
You're all right,
But at the same time, your next album could flop, right? And all of a sudden you may need those royalties from that other album, with somebody's training and working on your work, then all of a sudden you should be credited with it. So, and I think this is why, when we talk about the music industry, it is such a supportive and a creative kind of bunch, because, the big acts do support the small acts and they try and champion them. They kind of get it. I think you're right. Not everybody can make it. That's true. Not, there's only one Taylor Swift at the moment, right? There's lots of people who can fill arenas and fill stadiums, but there's a reason that she's the biggest artist on the planet right now, and that, I'm sure in a few years that may change, and that somebody else will come through and take that place. But I think, like everything, I think, the key message here, and we saw it earlier in the week with kind of newspapers all printing about, kind of fair AI on front pages, which was completely coordinated and unpaid for advertising campaign, essentially. So for, the traditional traditional press industry to have coordinated a campaign like that for another industry shows that creative support as well.
What do you, if you're just someone who's like, I just love listening to music, do you know what I mean? But I want to be able to support wherever I can. I've talked about a lot this afternoon. Obviously, I'm a big fan, but Ray is performing at the Oscars. But if you just look at the work that she's done fundamentally about bringing about conversations of independent artists, local artists, supporting their music and ensuring that writers own their music. You know, she's constantly going on about that and the importance of it. And that's why we're all talking about it. What should an individual be doing? What's the small one thing that they can do to support their local musician that they love?
So I think, you know, if you're using a streaming service, play them as much as possible. Get them listened to. Obviously go to their shows, because that's the way they can get instant income. So that's there. Buy their merchandise, buy their t-shirt, tell your friends, make sure you know about them, and actually champion them. Because Ray's a perfect example, somebody who wants to make sure that, you know, I mean, it's funny because you're saying that she's championed the next generation. She's kind of right at the top of that next generation, you know, totally. Kind of going, I was at the Brits
But she's been in the industry for how long?
She has, yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, for a long time. And record-breaking Brit Award winner last year, you know, almost a year to the week. So I think it's anything to get out and support and, you know, go to the gig, you know, listen to the music. I think, you know, life is very different. You know, 5 years ago, we were all cooped up at home. We couldn't get out. And I think, you know, one of the first things that people did was flock to restaurants and flock to live gigs, because we all missed it so much. Like, a world without music is not a world I want to be in.
Yeah, neither do I. Awful. Amen to that. It's so lovely having you here, Ryan. It'd be great to get you back in.
Anytime.
I feel like this is going to be an ever-changing conversation. People can go to audu.com, AUDOO.com for more details. If you'd like to weigh in the conversation, 0800 731 2000 is the time. Right, it's 4:31. Let's get an update on the roads, traffic and travel now. Billy Reeves.
Berkshire, Surrey stretch of the M25 very slow because of an accident.